What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. And I'm recording this on the Monday now after the Washington 28-20 loss to the Los Angeles Rams. And another disaster for Ron Rivera, this coaching staff, this offense, this defense. It was an all-around disaster. They put up 20 points on offense, but even then, that's what Scott Turner was putting up a year ago. So there's really been no improvement this season. There hasn't been any improvement over these last few weeks, and especially now in the second game with Jack Del Rio out and Ron Rivera calling these defensive plays, you're still having some pretty big mishaps happen in that secondary. So we'll just dive right into it, I guess. Sam Howell getting benched in this one, which is kind of surprising after going 11 of 26, 102 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. So Howell, he took a seat because Rivera apparently decided that Howell wasn't good enough and they wanted to try and win the game. Jacoby Brissett comes in. He goes 8 of 10, 124 yards, 2 touchdowns. He looked really well. He had the highest Commanders passer rating out of any quarterback so far this season at a 157.9. So Brissett came in, looked really, really well. Sam Howell struggled over these last few weeks now. It's been quite a few weeks in a row that Sam Howell is struggling. We'll look here at the defenses that he's played over his last few weeks. He's got Dallas, the Miami defense, Los Angeles defense. It's not going to get easier for him too. The New York Jets defense next week, and then 49ers and Dallas. All of these defenses top 5 in the NFL. So it's not getting easier for the young quarterback. And I know at the beginning of the year when we played some easier defenses, the Falcons, the Seahawks, he played well against. Even for some reason, the Eagles, he played well against. He's not going up against these tougher defenses, and we're now seeing the effects of that. Again, a young quarterback, a guy that was really unproven coming into this year with only one start under his belt in his NFL career. Howell comes in, and now over this last stretch where Washington has lost 5 straight games in 6 weeks, it's not going to get easier. You got the Jets, the 49ers, and Dallas in terms of defenses, so it's not going to get easier for Sam Howell. He's going to need to be able to adjust. He had another bad game today, just did not look comfortable at all. I will say, on the bright side, only 1 sack today on Sam Howell, which I think is a season low. Only 1 sack. So it was a great performance from the offensive line, but Sam Howell and Eric Bieniemy couldn't get things going at all. And when he was benched in the third, fourth quarter, Jacoby Brissett comes in down 2 I think it's down 17 or down 2 touchdowns, maybe something like that. Leads the team on 2 touchdown drives, 8 of 10 for 124. These are some good numbers. Now, Ron Rivera has said that Sam Howell will be the starting quarterback moving forward still. So Howell will start next week against a really good defense with the New York Jets. I'm excited to see how that's going to go against guys like Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, plus that pass rush with guys like Bryce Huff, Jermaine Johnson, and some other guys. So it's going to be a tough matchup. Quinnen Williams also in there. It's going to be a tough matchup for this Commanders offensive line and for Sam Howell. If today said it, or if Sunday said anything about Howell's performance against good defenses, like the Rams, this was a middle of the pack defense, middle of the pack secondary, and you only put up 102 yards, and you threw the ball less than 50% from the field, from the pocket. This is kind of like a middle of the pack defense you're going up against, and you're still struggling. So it kind of, we'll talk about it later because we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about. Over there, we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about, but this was not a good performance from Sam Howell in terms of maybe an audition for next season, whoever the new head coach is, whether it be Eric Bieniemy or whether it be a guy like Ben Johnson maybe, or Brian Flores. This is not a good audition so far over these last few weeks from Sam Howell. So not good at all in terms of Rivera and his plan this week. It was his second game calling defensive plays, and yet it still stinks. We'll get into that in a second. But Rivera overall, he's doing his thing. I don't really know why he's still the head coach. I've said it in past weeks. You're not going to learn anything new with him for the rest of the season. And after a performance like this, where it was 20-20, the score was a lot closer than the game actually was. like you're not going to um learn anything new about this team from here to the end of the year with Rivera at head coach. Now, if you want to audition a guy like Eric Bieniemy, that's what I've been saying we should have been doing for the last few weeks, and I don't think it's happening this week. At least Rivera being fired, and I doubt it happens. I would say there's still a more likely chance he stays the head coach for the rest of the year than he doesn't. But after when you're piling up wins like this, 5 in a row, yeah, it's not helping your job and not helping your case in the future. So Rivera, we haven't learned much about this team, and I really think if I was Josh Harris, if I was Mark Gein and the people making calls up in the front office, I'd get rid of Rivera, make Bieniemy the interim head coach, which I know he's had some struggles overall so far with like player relationships and all of that, like working them too hard in practices. But like if you're going to be a head coach in the NFL, you want to learn about them now and want to learn as much as you can about them now if they're trying to be a candidate for future jobs. So Eric Bieniemy, I was hoping at some point would get some interim head coach practice. It doesn't sound like it. Sounds like it's still going to be at the end of the season. But again, these losses aren't helping this team at all. And I don't know if there's anything we learned new about today. There wasn't even Brian Robinson in the run game. We had Chris Rodriguez go 10 carries for 35 yards. Antonio Gibson had 4 carries for 15 yards and actually looked somewhat decent. He had 5 catches for 20 yards. He looked somewhat decent today as the lead back. And yet you still go with Chris Rodriguez for pretty much all of the second half. I don't really know what the plan is there at all, really. And when we look at time of possession, the Rams had it for 35 minutes. It was dominating. They had over 440 total yards. They had 23 first downs, which was insane. They were 9 of 16 on third down efficiency. That's crazy. Washington offensively, like I'm just looking at it. Sam Howell threw the ball 26 times. So Washington only threw the ball 36 times. Rodriguez ran it 10 times. Like Washington wasn't getting a lot of plays, mostly because they were 3 of 14 on third down. You're not going to win games when you're 3 of 14 on third down. You cannot win games like that. So it's another disappointing performance on Ron Rivera's part, and I know he was kind of just saying his usual stuff during the press conference, but yeah, Rivera was not good. It was not a good showing for him, and especially I mentioned it before, but the defense today, Cooper Kupp on his touchdown, 63-yard touchdown, he had 17 yards of separation. 17 yards of separation. I don't know what the plan is in the secondary. It was things to get Rivera wanted things to get more simpler. It's not working out, and we've clearly seen it's not working out, making things more simpler. 17 yards of separation for Cooper Kupp, their best wide receiver, their best offensive playmaker, the guy that you're going to be, or you should have been all week preparing for, trying to figure out how to stop Cooper Kupp, and he's still getting 17 yards of separation from your defense, like against your secondary. I mean, it was not a good game once more from the secondary. Matthew Stafford, 25 of 33, 258 yards, 2 touchdowns. An easy game for him. Cooper Kupp had over 100 yards and a touchdown as well. So, like when you're planning all week for a guy like Cooper Kupp, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, you should be preparing for him, and yet he's still getting 17 yards of separation against your defense. It's incredible how bad this defense is. Is one of the worst defenses that I've ever seen Washington have, like ever. It looks like every week it looks like this defense is going up against it's kind of like a lower level college defense, and it's going up against an Alabama or Georgia offense every week. So it's embarrassing really at this point. I don't know how many more words I have for this defense, because in terms of like sacks and whatever, they had 3 sacks. One from Quan Martin. Daron Payne actually showed up today, so that was like a first in a month and a half or so. He had 2 sacks today. So Payne was really the only one that showed up on this defense, which was a little bit surprising. Jonathan Allen, didn't really see him much. He had 1 tackle for loss, but like, come on now, we're not paying Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne, 2 top 10 defensive tackle, and like both of them are being paid in the top 10 in defensive tackles in terms of money and contracts. We're not paying them to put up 2 sacks in the last 3 weeks. Like these two guys should be our best 2 players, most impactful players on defense. And this is the first performance, like first time I've mentioned Deron Payne doing something good on this podcast and what has felt like a month and a half or 2 months. And Jonathan Allen, he's been better so far this season than Deron Payne, but today, like he was not there. So that wasn't great. And I guess if we're talking about good stuff, Deron Payne played well. I really liked what I said out of Khaleke Hudson as well. Hudson had a solid game. He had 14 tackles and a tackle for loss, but I really think, especially with Jamin Davis out for the season, it looks like Khaleke Hudson is going to be the best linebacker we have in this linebacker group. Cody Barton was out there. He was doing a lot of cardio. Emmanuel Forbes only played 6 snaps coming back from his leg injury. So I really don't know what the plan is with the first round pick, who was just a rookie this year. Don't really know what the future holds for him. Guys like Quan Martin, he was kind of impactful today. He had 10 tackles, again replacing Derek Forrest, but it wasn't good. It wasn't good. It was another bad game for this defense, which is really sad to see how one of these staples that Ron Rivera came in. Again, Ron Rivera, a defensive-minded head coach. He comes in, he builds this defense 4 first-rounders across the defensive line. You add another first-rounder in Jamin Davis at linebacker. All these guys should be making impactful plays. You still had Kendall Fuller for almost all of the Rivera tenure, besides, I think, 1 year. So these are guys that should be making plays, and you add another first-rounder. I mean, this defense had 5 first-round picks worth of players at one point, plus the second-round pick with Quan Martin. Yeah, Jamin Davis, Emmanuel Forbes, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat, Chase Young, all on this defense, and yet it was a bottom 5 defense in the NFL with those 5 guys, 6 first-round picks. It was a bottom 5 defense. So Rivera spent a lot of draft capital on defense over his 4 draft classes so far, and we've seen how bad this team is. Rivera's build, however he builds this defense, has not been good, and has been an absolute disaster. Because you look now, no more Chase Young, no more Montez Sweat. Deron Payne has not done well ever since getting that new contract. He had his best game of his season today, and he only had 2 sacks, 3 tackles. He was more of a force today than he was in past games. But Jonathan Allen, we haven't really heard his name at all. He hasn't played like a top 15, top 20 defensive tackle in the league so far this year. It's embarrassing how the downfall of this defense, one that was considered to be one of the best in the NFL in 2020. And then what happened in 2021, Chase Young goes down, but then even then, this secondary is bad. And then once more in 2022, you had one of the best defenses, and heading into this year, you had a guy like Emmanuel Forbes in that secondary. You had Quan Martin in that secondary, which was really the only weak spot was the secondary. And you address that need in the draft, and it still is bad. It gets worse somehow, and it goes from top of the league to the bottom of the league, even after you add guys in the draft and guys like Cody Barton. The loss of Cole Holcomb is not making this defense from 3rd to 30th. The loss of Cole Holcomb is not doing that. You add guys like Emmanuel Forbes, Quan Martin. It's crazy how bad this defense has fallen off from last season and from 2020. So, that's the defense. But in terms of special teams, I haven't really talked about special teams that much this year. And after we talked about how bad Cameron Cheeseman's snaps were at the beginning of the season, we haven't really talked about it much since because, it's been fine. In the moments where it mattered, says Ron Rivera, Cheeseman delivered. But Cameron Cheeseman was released today after a hideous performance on Sunday. This was his quote, which if you're a Washington fan, you've probably seen it by now, but this was his quote after the game on if he was worried that the Commanders will make a change at long snapper. He said, quote, I've been worried all year. I haven't been performing the way I've been wanting to. Most places, I probably wouldn't be around still. He's saying that, on most places, that last sentence, most places, I probably wouldn't be around still, is a crazy quote. That just shows the standards of this Washington team, the standards that Ron Rivera's had on this team. Washington, we had Nick Sundberg like in 2020. Yeah, Nick Sundberg, he was fine at long snapper. Washington releases him. They create a hole in their team that didn't really need to be there. They just kind of created a hole in their team. Then you trade up for Cameron Cheeseman in the 6th round. And if you're drafting a long snapper in the 6th round and you're trading up for a long snapper in the 6th round, they better be one of the best long snappers and one of the most consistent long snappers in the entire NFL. And that has not been the case this year. It's been garbage, really, from week 1 to now, 15 weeks in. It has been a disaster for Cameron Cheeseman, and Washington releasing him on the Monday following the game. I mean, it needed to be done after the performance on Sunday. It needed to be done. So I don't really know yet who Washington will be trying out. I don't think they've said, or any of the reporters have said anything about Washington trying out anyone. But yeah, they're gonna need a new long snapper next week. It'll be interesting to see how it goes against the New York Jets, a team that is in a lot of there's a lot of stuff happening in New York right now. Eliminated from the playoffs this week. I doubt Aaron Rodgers will play next week because of that. Zach Wilson is in concussion protocol. Trevor Siemian is their backup, so we could be getting a Sam Howell versus Trevor Siemian battle on Sunday next week. So that the game today was bad. The game next week, it'll be interesting to see, because if Washington were to win a game in these last 3 games and ruin their top 5 draft pick right now, it would be against this Jets team and this Jets offense. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see if Trevor Siemian turns into prime Tom Brady with the Jets. But yeah, that's my thoughts on this week's game. I kind of want to also talk about the NFL draft a little bit, because, well, Washington is 4-10. We're 4-10. We have the 4th overall pick in the draft, and after next week, we could have the 2nd overall pick in the draft. So I really want to talk about this the NFL draft a little bit, because right now, sitting at 4, as many Washington fans know, especially after the performance today from Sam Howell, a new regime comes in. I would not be surprised if they draft a quarterback with that 4th overall pick, or wherever they land in the top 5. I would not be surprised. You've got Caleb Williams, who's probably going to go number 1. You've got Drake May, who will probably go number 2. But Jaden Daniels has been a guy he's going to be turning 24. This is his birthday as I'm recording this. He's 24 years old now. But he's a guy, the Heisman Trophy winner this year at LSU. He's a dual threat quarterback. He can throw it. He's one of the most explosive athletes in all of college football. I would not be surprised if he sneaks his way into the top 5 and a team falls in love with him, especially a possible new regime that comes in. And so I would not be surprised if Washington drafts Jaden Daniels or some other quarterback with their first pick instead of a tackle. Now, it would hurt if it's not a tackle like Olu Fashanu or Joe Alt, but at this point, with the new regime coming in, do you trust a former 5th-round pick who's still pretty unproven in the league in Sam Howell, or do you want your own guy like a Jaden Daniels, like a Drake May, possibly even like a Caleb Williams in the draft? Do you take one of those guys? If I'm a new regime, and I'm thinking about this right now, especially after the performances over the last few weeks from Sam Howell, I really am leaning towards that second option of, if I'm a new regime coming in, do I trust a former 5th-round pick who has really not proven himself yet in the league 2 years in, or do I want to draft my own guy that I've scouted, that I've kind of looked over for a few months and have kept my eye on, and draft him in the 1st round instead? This team has a lot of building to do, a lot of reconstruction that's going to happen in 2024 and in 2025 and beyond, because after performances like today, or like Sunday or whatever, against the Rams, and some of the other performances over this last month against Dallas, against Miami, this team is nowhere even close. You can't blame this just on coaching now, because these players, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Cam Curl, like, some of these guys haven't showed up. I will say one little thing. Terry showed up on Sunday. He had a massive game, probably the best game of his season so far. So shout out him. But some of these other veterans like Cam Curl, who's on an expiring contract, Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne, who are on massive deals, massive contracts, I would not be surprised if they're playing their last few games here in the rest of December and in January against Dallas. I would not be surprised if they're playing the last few games as a Washington Commander this season, because if a new regime comes in, which a new regime will come in at this point, I'm not just going to say if, when a new regime comes in, these guys could be on the move, and I wouldn't be surprised. So the NFL draft coming up in 5 months or so, and this new regime is going to have a lot of pressure on them to deliver with their five draft picks in the first, or is it 4? Yes, 5 draft picks in the first 100 picks. So a lot of pressure on this new regime when it comes in, because Washington fans they've struggled for too long in losing. So in the last 5 head coaches, none of them have had above a 500 record. So yeah, that kind of explains what this team has gone through. But that'll be it for this week's episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. Next week's episode will be out. Do I put out an episode on Christmas Day? I probably will put out an episode on Christmas Day. Next episode out on Christmas Day, recapping the Commanders game against the New York Jets. Merry Christmas, happy holidays to everyone listening or watching this week's episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. That'll be it for this week's episode. See you guys in the next one. Peace.